Oh, that's what you're checking?
Yeah,
Oh,
I'm just
checking
looking
inside the camera.
I'm looking
Oh,
at-
nice. Yeah. That's good.
Yeah, let's take a photo real quick. All right.
Awesome.
Well, it's just recording, so we'll just kind of go at it. But
Okay.
dude, Art, thanks for taking the
Absolutely.
time to talk with me, man.
Hey, thanks for bringing me on. Appreciate it.
Well, just as a quick intro, this is Art Babayan, a longtime friend. We used to work together in multiple facets as co-workers and also kind of venturing off into a little bit of a business type stuff. And amazing artist and entrepreneur.
Thank you.
So, yeah, man, welcome to the channel, dude.
Thank you. Great being here, and thank you for having me.
Right on, man. Dude, tell us a little bit more about yourself, man. Like your journey through the art life and the art career is pretty exceptional, in my opinion. I think it's pretty unique, and I think you're also such a inspirational person. But like, yeah, tell the people a little bit about you, your background, where you're from.
Well, I started in my art journey. Basically, started in high school when I didn't even know you can have an art career. I was the terrible kid in class that was drawing the skulls and like marijuana leaves and things like that, and getting kicked out of art class. But I was doing it good because my uncle was an artist, and I was always around art, and I had a little bit of ability to draw, and that led to freaking drawing cars all the time. So I used to draw like all my friends' cars dropped and add spoilers, doing all of this stuff. And then I went to try to go into like the business direction at PCC. And while I was doing that, I was taking art classes just to maintain my GPA, because art was easy for me. It came naturally. And then everything else was a little bit harder, like business and math and all
that
stuff.
academic stuff.
Yeah, academic stuff. I was just like, I couldn't focus, man. I met Stan Kong. I don't know if you know him.
Yeah, I know Stan. At PCC, right?
Yeah, PCC. He's probably one of the most important people that I've met in my life in terms of giving me direction. And Stan, basically, I took a product design class because I had taken all the other classes, and then I'm like, I'll just try this.
Yeah.
Took a product design class, and then he just kind of opened the doors into the art world. And it was just like, art isn't everything. Like, everything you see, from animation to product design to architecture, there's an art element to it that you as an artist, if you love doing this stuff, if you like drawing, if you like doing any of these things, that can kind of be a direction you can go into. You just need to figure out which area of art you would want to focus on. And then he sort of exposed me to Art Center.
Right.
And then it was just like, whoa, like this is just like, it just kind of opened up my eyes, and I sort of became kind of enamored with the whole, like, there's just so much to do.
Yeah.
But with Stan, it was mostly like product design. So I was kind of sticking to that while trying to get into Art Center. And then, I've always been a huge gamer. So I play a lot of games, and that's just been like kind of part of my, when I was a kid, I used to ditch school to go play games.
Right.
Like, that was my thing. So I started digging into, they were just starting to do a lot of like 3D Max and Maya type classes. So I was taking those, learning a little bit of 3D.
Where were you taking those classes?
I was taking those at like, I think it was like this art academy or something like that. It was just like a small school in North Hollywood area. And it was kind of like a little like it was just like random teachers that were kind of teaching.
That's pretty
like over there,
like ahead of its time, especially for back then, teaching that like very technical software stuff.
Yeah. And I was really into it at first, like I really wanted to understand it. So I started taking more Maya classes and things like that. And then I realized like Art Center has the night program. I tried to get into Art Center. It took maybe like 3-4 tries to get in. So I would get rejected because I wanted to go into illustration to do entertainment and character designs and entertainment stuff, but most of my art was from Stan's class, which was a lot of product design.
Right, right.
So it was like I didn't know how to draw.
Did you do that car
figures.
rendering thing
Yeah,
where you
dude.
projected on
Oh,
the?
yeah,
Yeah.
I did it.
Nice.
I did a nice Porsche actually.
Nice. You know what? What's funny? Because we gotta get into that,
like
man. Because I
crazy.
think that's like it's like a foreshadowing of your future, bro.
Yeah.
Like like you're doing like all this car stuff,
Yep.
and then the drawing Porsche. Like we'll get into that later, but I think that's so fun.
Definitely.
But if, for anyone that doesn't know, Stan Kong, so PCC is Pasadena City College, and it's in Los Angeles, and it's a junior college where there's a gentleman named Stan Kong who is also a teacher at Art Center who teaches at the junior college and kind of helps lost kids that want to do art find their way. I was one of the same thing. Like he really helped me out a lot too.
Yeah. I think he sent a lot of kids to Art Center.
Totally.
Like he was definitely like the gateway to.
He's like that encouraging uncle that you know that you always kind of wanted. That's like, oh yeah, you should really do this. You know.
Yeah. He was honestly an awesome guy. I've run into him a few times throughout, my career, and just I always thank him and tell him, how awesome he was.
Super. And he's like he doesn't change, right? Like he's always the same dude, has good energy, right? Funny jokes, really, good stories.
Really great guy, man. Really great guy.
Dude.
So yeah, that was kind of the beginnings of the journey. And then another big point was, when I started digging into Art Center night classes, I took a class called game design.
Oh, right.
Which was like really like that kind of set off my whole gaming career. Initially, I wanted to go into film too. Just FYI, I was taking a lot of like film classes, doing a lot of film stuff. I thought that was a direction that I was going to go.
And what year is this around?
I would say this is. Man, I don't want to date myself.
It's inevitable.
It's probably like late '90s, early
2000s. Okay.
So early 2000s, and then I took the class. I took the night class, and it was with I think John Fiorito. I think he's one of the studio heads at Insomniac.
Okay.
And he was that was just an awesome class because he just explained game design and how you make games and how you go like everything behind the curtain basically. And then he took us to our field trip was at Insomniac, which was a startup at that time.
Whoa.
Yeah.
Whoa.
So they were
out on that, right?
Yeah, dude, we went to Insomniac. It was like on Barham. Is it Barham? When you go to Hollywood, what's that?
Yeah, that connects kind of Glendale and
like right past Forest Lawn.
I think it's Barham. Yeah.
So if you go like right when you go down the hill, there's a building right there. And they were in that building. And so we went in there, and I'm this young kid, and I'm walking around. He took us at night. The studio was kind of not a lot of people there, but you can see, I would say maybe 20, 30 desks or something like that. It wasn't too big. But as we were walking around, we came around, and I saw this guy, like not too much older than us, like playing a game or something, and then he was like, that's the guy who started this.
Whoa.
And that was just kind of like this like big moment of like, I could see myself like in this industry. That's awesome. Like there's a lot of, I don't know. I was just really inspired by that whole thing. And then I kind of sort of walked away from film at that point and really committed myself to gaming.
Wow. Wow.
So then after that, it was just, Art Center, went through the traditional route. It was crazy because it's like when we were first starting out, I would say our time was when people were transitioning from traditional to digital. This is when digital was like, becoming a thing. And it's like I was very resistant to doing that. It was just like.
Any reason why? Like,
I just thought it was just like I didn't think it was fair. It was like, what do you mean you can undo and da 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 da? That's all BS.
Like more of a purist mentality.
It was just like I felt like that was hurting your kind of your training to become great at the craft. Because it's like you can make mistakes and undo them. Whereas like Art Center is all about that. Like doing that perfect piece, right? And it's kind of, you're constantly being pushed to draw the perfect figure and do, and I was struggling with all of that. I was not a good student at Art Center. I was like probably like mid tier at around there. It was, you know, there was so many talented people in that class, you know, including yourself. And it was just like, you were always just like, the competition was, it was a small group. I mean, you're like 10 people, 15 people, so everybody knows each other very intimately. But then there was, everybody was good. You know, there was,
everyone tried hard, right? Everyone worked really hard.
So it's like, if you're not bringing 1,000% of yourself, even at that, you would just still like, you know, artists are very insecure, and when you compare your work all the time, it doesn't feel great. You know? So.
So like, okay, so art, let's go back to Art Center, right? Like, so you went into the illustration major, and you're like, I want to do character design and so on and so forth. Fast forward to now, right? Where I don't like, can you tell us what you kind of do now? But the question is, did you ever see yourself like from Art Babayan, the student, to what you do now? Like, did you ever really think that was possible? You know?
Honestly, it was really hard to see the future when you're doing what you're doing, because everything is so kind of like hyper focused on the immediate. I knew I wanted to be in gaming somehow. I thought I would be doing like either like character designs or machines, whatever, you know. It was just like, I couldn't even see that far, because it's like, I was like, you know, there was so many artists already that were so good, and game companies are very like, there weren't a lot of game companies, so it was just like, just kind of chugging along, trying to figure it out. You know, there was no concept of where I'm going and where I'm going to end up.
And in a way, sometimes that's kind of cool, because I think sometimes like when people have too much of a defined direction, they don't explore these other outside possibilities sometimes. But we gotta kind of explain how we got so connected. Because we after Art Center, we started working together. I remember walking into an interview at an advertising agency, and one of the first people I see walking through the lobby is you. I was like, what? You know, this is awesome, man. And then so it was called Petrol Advertising, and I worked there for about 2 years. But Art and I were downstairs in the art department. We shared a small room. First was just you and I, and then you, me, and Clarence.
Clarence was awesome.
It was like, if anyone knows that the advertising and the entertainment space, that industry, it's a lot of work. Like it's 8-hour days, or like no way. Maybe an 8-hour morning.
The early days, if you can do early, it was about 9 to 10 hours. Like that's like when there's nothing going on. But average day was around 10 to 12 hours. So you come in at like 8 or 9 in the morning, and you leave at around 9 or 10 at night. That was just kind of the average. And then the late days were like 12. How many? We've done how many all-nighters together?
We've done all-nighter.
Like, all-nighters were like once a month at least.
So. And it's crazy, because, you know, I think nowadays it would be a weird culture, right, for that to happen now. But I would say back then it was pretty common. You know what I mean?
No, it was like, we'd get like a freaking pizza. Everybody was happy.
Or feast from the east, you know what I mean?
That was
the Chinese food.
That was
man, good memories. But I think because of all that time we were there in that room, just doing art, sharing, we got really close. You know, grew a good friendship.
We got really close. And then you were always pushing myself to kind of keep everything open too, you know, because we were like, because it's like, advertising art is its own thing, but you and I both come from the concept world, and that was kind of our passion. And I remember like, I don't even know why we were doing this, but we would do concept paintings at lunch. Like, dude, no breaks. So it's like, we were just kind of like, you'd work all day, and then during lunch you would do like a speed painting and stuff.
You know, to kind of give this a little bit of a timestamp, I remember it was when there were certain concept art is coming to light through like a lot of the Gnomon workshops.
Yeah, yeah.
And then I remember one time you came back, I think it was you came back from a workshop and you're like, dude, you got to check out these stamp brushes that these guys are using at Ubisoft. And we're just like, what? Dude,
Yeah,
so that's pretty back
like
in the day.
Craig Mullins becoming like, his stuff was starting to get really hot.
Yeah.
And all of us were like, how the hell is he doing this?
Yeah, we were so
we're
lost.
like, because it's like our world at that time was you do a line drawing and then you airbrush it in.
Yeah.
You know, it was like kind of like taking the traditional format of illustration and doing it digitally.
Yeah.
You know, so
funny thing about Craig Mullins and how you talk about digital art almost being a cheat to illustration. Once I saw Craig Mullins, I was like, he's doing what a painter would do, right? Like if he was a John Singer Sargent in the modern day, that's like what I kind of interpreted as, man. So it almost rejuvenated this, like, oh, that's what I want to do with digital art, you know?
Yeah, he was definitely like the inspiration to. It just took, I think, digital art to the next level because it wasn't like this formula.
Yeah,
you know, where it's like, oh, you need to freaking draw it first, and then get your lines all cleaned up, and then you layer in the paint under it, and
because almost like a product design like formula, right? Or like transportation, like how they use the materials and stuff.
Exactly, it was exactly that. But yeah, with Craig Mullins, it was just like, this is painting. You know, this is like, it was just awesome. Yeah.
So it's kind of interesting, right? Like, so you're really into cars, so we'll use this analogy. Kind of hearing your background, it's kind of cool because you have art. And like you have this uncle that was like really into art, and then, you know, Stan Kong, and, you know, you took a video game class and 3D classes, and they're all sort of like pointing to the center point, like kind of like fuel and, you know, combustion, like all this stuff's working together. But what do you think was the igniter? You know what I'm saying? The thing that really sparked the passion for like, because otherwise it would just be a lot of random interests until they really come together, you know?
Honestly, it was just this, like, it's kind of messed up to even say it, but for me, it was just like, I really didn't want to fail in this industry. Because it's like I was, you know, before I even got into this industry, my family was like, my dad had a construction company. I worked there. I wasn't a great student at school. I got into a lot of trouble and stuff. So I was always working in construction, and I was working with a bunch of like old dudes, right? That were just like, it was just kind of like scary because you were like, is this my future? Like, I'm gonna be like fucking painting houses.
One day
for the
you
rest
see
of
your
my
face
life.
on their face, you're like, oh, like, is that my future?
Man. And it was just, I would start when I was taking classes. There was like one of my like relatives who we used to work with, this older dude. You know, I love him. He's a great guy, but he was just like, why are you wasting your time? And it was just like, that was kind of like, it was creating this kind of like scary sort of, you know, not that I wouldn't mind doing the construction work and all that stuff. I find that now I'm actually drawn to it even more. You know, now that I'm at,
funny how it goes circle.
Yeah, I'm like, I wouldn't mind doing that stuff, but it was just like, am I just gonna kind of go in this cycle of like just working for my dad and painting houses and doing modeling, things like that, or can I actually have some kind of future, you know? And so it was, the motivating factor was not to fail. It was just like, whatever I end up, wherever I end up, didn't matter as long as like I can complete my. Actually, let me take one step back. I realized this was an interesting sort of thing that happened to me. Now it's coming back to me. So when I used to draw, I couldn't finish my work. I would always start stuff and then
I see where you're going.
Get bored. Like start stuff, never finish it. I never got to that finish line. And then one day I had this like deep conversation with myself, and it was like you need to like stick to things and go to the end.
Finish it.
Yep. And then that became, okay, finish the work. And then I started like really sort of planning my future. Like in that one day of having this kind of like epiphany, you know, like finishing is the key. It's not about anything else.
Yeah.
You can start a million different things, you know, because I was kind of lost.
It's key advice. That's really good advice. Yeah.
So and then from that point on, I was like, you're gonna get into art center. This is the next goal, is to get to this school. The goal after that is to finish this school. The goal after that is to get a job in the industry. The goal after that, and I just kind of set up these sort of points that were just like, no matter what it takes, you have to get there.
Right on.
And that became kind of the big driving force. So even when I had no direction, I didn't know where I was going, I knew that I had to finish the school. And when I finished the school, because there was so many times you can give up, right? Because it's like, you're not doing well.
Yeah.
School's kind of overwhelming. It's just like the old Art would have been quit, you know, like screw this, go do construction or go do something else. But because that mindset was kind of set in at that point, it was just like, keep going, keep doing, and then you'll see what happens. And then once I got out of school, it's just like, get a job, you know, like, I don't give a shit where it is.
Yeah.
Like, you need to get a job in the industry, you know. And yeah, I mean, I got lucky. My first job was at EA out of all places.
Right.
So it was just like, whoa,
That's
what
right.
the, how did I get
like
here?
Redwood or something?
Yeah, it was at Redwood. It was crazy because it's like, I had a horrible graduation like display.
Really?
Like, it was really bad. I think like the night of, when we were setting everything up, somebody placed their artwork on my piece. And it like tore right into it. So it was just like a lot of messy things happened. But luckily, like I think it was Jessica Lowe.
Yeah.
She had made a flyer for our department, the entertainment design department, had sent it out everywhere.
That's cool, man.
Or Art Center had sent it out, or something like that.
Yeah.
And somebody at EA had looked at this flyer and reached out to a bunch of artists on there to just submit their portfolios because they couldn't make it to the grad show.
Right, because they're up in Northern California.
Yeah, exactly. So then I followed up. A lot of guys didn't, like, there was a couple of guys that followed up, but a lot of guys were like, they just sent this to everybody.
Yeah.
So they didn't. And these guys were the best guys, you know, like the top guys didn't. And then like, I was just like, I'm going to keep going and tried. I was talking to EA and I was like, you know, really trying to get this job. And then they narrowed it down to like 2 to 3 people, you know, because I think there was 10 of us. And I honestly, I think 5 people were just butthurt that everybody was asked.
Yeah, okay. You sure?
Just like, dude,
they're not special.
Yeah, they're like, these guys suck. Why are you asking them? You know? And then it was just like follow through. And then EA had asked us to, can you like put your artwork on a website? And websites back then were just like
oh my
new thing too, man.
Yep.
So I had to learn how to like put together an online little like portfolio, which was like its own kind of nightmare. And I was the only one that was able to do it.
Wow.
Yeah, so it was just purely luck that, you know, I went through every single one of those steps. Like, first, a lot of guys got eliminated because of their, like, they didn't want to. And then, you know, in the end, the competition was like, I'm willing to do, you know, go the extra mile and figure out how to build a website. Did that, and then I got hired, and it was just like, it was kind of like, what's that syndrome, like imposter syndrome? Like, what am I doing here? Like, why am I at EA? You know, but it was like, then you go backwards, and you're like, well, you've done all this work, so
that's cool.
You know, just stick to that formula, try to learn and figure it out, you know?
So that's kind of how you started. You started at AEA, and then eventually you were at Petrol, which is like marketing and advertising.
Yeah. But it was interesting because it's like the day I'm supposed to fly out to EA, I got, you know, somebody from Petrol reached out and said, hey, we're looking to hire you. We saw your work at the grad show. We'd love to talk to you. And I was like, I'm about to, like, I already accepted a job, I'm leaving. And then they were like, well, you know, it looks like you're close to us. Do you mind just coming in for a quick interview?
Wow.
And then, you know, what time are you leaving? We just did this back and forth, and I was driving out actually to EA at like 5 at night, something like that. And these guys were like, this is like at 10 a.m. I'm having this conversation. And at 12 o'clock, I went for the interview. And I remember one of my art center teachers always saying, like, you know, you got to go through the interviews and don't say no too quickly, and kind of like go see what it's about and all this. So I went and I walked in there, and it was just like posters and photos, and I'm like, what am I gonna do here? You know, like, this is not like I didn't see a single illustration. But I interviewed with them, and they were really cool. You know, I interviewed with Al. He's awesome, and
Al's the founder, basically.
And he was just like, you know, I think he told me, like, you know, if things don't work out, you know, like, we'd love to give you a shot and see what you can do, you know, and this and that. And so, yeah, I went to EA. I was up there, and then I was realizing it was, you know, I was getting really sort of lonely up there because I have a lot of family and all this down here. And it was like around that time I was, you know, getting ready to get married and stuff. So I asked EA to transfer me to the LA offices, and they said they would do it. This transfer was like kind of, it took a lot longer than anticipated. So what I did was, like, I needed kind of like an in-between job. And so I reached out to Petrol and I said, hey guys, can I, you know, I'm willing to do freelance if you guys, you know, want it. And they were like, yeah, sure. I went in there, I did this, like, you know, it was like most intense sort of weekend. Al asked me to come in on the weekend. I go in there, there's nobody. You know, it's just me and him. And then he was like, he gave me this assignment. It was working on some kind of a pirate game.
Okay.
And like, so what should I do? And he's like, just do some sketches for a poster idea. But I don't know anything about this. He doesn't give me any other direction than that. And then I go down there, and I've been working on PCs this whole time. They have Macs.
Yeah, that's so true.
I'm looking at this, like, that old school green iMac thing.
Yeah, right.
I don't even know how to turn this thing on, man. I'm like, what the, like, what am I supposed to do here? You know, like, by the time I figured out how to turn this thing on, and then, like, barely got everything figured out and going, and then I'm sitting there like, how do I, like, do movie poster designs? What does that
and there's no, like, Google back then. You can't flip open your phone, and you know what I mean?
No,
like,
dude, it's like there's no information. And I'm downstairs and he's upstairs, and I don't want to ask questions to not come off like I'm dumb, you know? But, like, the frustration just kind of built up, and I said, you know what, screw this shit. What I'm gonna do is I'm just gonna go my style. And, like, I just did these like super painterly rough kind of ideas. And I'm like, I want to get out of here, dude. I don't want to be here. You know, I did a bunch of like rough sort of like, again, very painterly concepts. And then he comes down and he looks at it. He's like, that's really cool.
Oh, right on, dude.
And because back then it was, what they were doing was a lot of the old school sort of line drawing. And, you know, kind of like laying in the line and then painting it and doing all that stuff. And Clarence was like killing it with those things. You know? But it's like, I didn't have sketchbooks on me. I didn't have any of that stuff. I was just like, I just went in and just kind of rough painted it, and he liked it. And he was just like, this is really interesting, you know,
that's
like
cool.
We can start using this kind of style for concepts and stuff like that. You can kind of see it because that color already, you know, it was rough, but you can see conceptually where it was going.
An interesting thing about Alan is that he also went to Art Center. He also went through the illustration department. So it's almost like we have similar eyes. You know? He's able to see like really loose things in the way you were trying to interpret them.
Exactly. And then he was just like, yeah, I love this, man. It was cool. And we just hit it off right there and then. And from there on, it was just like, I kept coming back. And then when I started going to the advertising route and started working at Petrol and doing all of these things, I got to work on a lot of games. And that was sort of like this shift that happened in my mindset, because it was like I was very focused on doing concept art. But the thing that I realized that at like working at a studio was there's just a lot of the same. So it's like You know, I was painting like a pig carcass for I was painting rocks. I was painting everything that you can like conceptualize. You had to like do concepts or so the 3D artist can kind of build it.
Right.
You know, to a point where it's like concept moves so fast, 3D can't catch up, right? So I was just like getting the concept approved and actually building the 3D myself because I had some 3D background. So I was doing a lot of that just to keep myself busy. You know, I don't like slow moving things. I like a lot of chaos in my
it gets
work.
boring and it kind of gets like kind of drag, you know.
Yeah, and then obviously in advertising it was the opposite of that. It was like in a month there I did more work in 1 month than I had done, you know, my whole time at the game studio. You know, it was just like, dude, I like in game studio you have like a month to do a piece. Dude, a couple of weeks to do a piece, you know, like it takes time and you're like everything's like very slow moving, you know, you're doing all of this stuff, whereas this guy wanted like 4 or 5 pieces a day.
It's an interesting thing because I think that's such a true thing. All the different waters in this industry have different currents. Like they run at different speeds.
That's very, very well put.
So like in like a game company like that later kind of talk about, I had a similar experience where it's just like, here's a piece and it's like slow. Right. It's like a walk in the park. And then there's another one where it's like, run. And once you're done, here's another one, run, you know? And it's like,
these guys were like really, it just became, and that kind of became addicting.
Because I understand what you mean.
You start progressing really quickly.
Performance.
Like you have to generate stuff, so there's no room for like bullshitting around, you know?
So. I would also say Petrol, for at least for myself, was one of the first experiences to see how a company operates with art. Because it was kind of transparent, right? Like you'd see the client and you see what they do with the account people and the notes and then, they're pitching
really
this.
Small, so you're kind of like, you can see every moving part and everybody was connected. Like at EA, I would, you know, it was just like I was with a group of artists, but there's a couple of hundred people there, you know? So,
and even for myself, when I started my own company, I was like, I couldn't help but almost utilize so much of that knowledge from how I was, you know, how I was in that art department there and the whole pipeline that was kind of being used and stuff. It was like a big influence for me, at least, you know what I mean?
No, it was good, man.
So I have a question here that's kind of like, you know, we talk about some good ups and we'll talk about a little bit of downs, you know, but like every success has its battles, you know what I mean? Every hill you got to climb, it takes a lot of effort. But what were some of the toughest moments for you and what did you do to kind of get out of it?
Like career-wise, art-wise?
Sure. Yeah. We'll say in that spectrum.
You know, I would say there was a lot of times playing catch-up was really the thing, you know, not feeling like you're good enough. And
technique-wise?
Technique-wise, production-wise, getting, you know, there was always this like competition that was always almost better that you would have to just, it's like you're giving your 100% and then you realize like it's still not enough. You still got to get more out of yourself and you have to like, so it's like hard work isn't everything, you know. It was just kind of coming to that realization that you have to be really like smart about things, you know. You constantly have to like learn, like figure out what's working, what's not working, the decision-making process, all of these things kind of dawn on you through your struggles. And that was kind of the you know, one of the tough things was just like you're always trying to evolve and get better, and that road of evolution is really, really tough. You know, like to be able to like push yourself further and then further, because it's like every time you get to top of a hill, you see another hill.
True that.
You know, and it's another guy who's doing things better than you, and their work is incredible and all this stuff, and then you look at your own work and you're like, I have a lot of room to grow, you know? And dude, this was a mountain climb. Like, how the hell am I going to do that mountain now that I'm here? You know, so it was like, there was always this kind of like sense of insecurity about everything. You know, that to overcome that is a difficult thing, and but you have to go through that process. And if you do go through that process, then you build new tools. You know, you build new tools, and these tools aren't your like art tools. They're your like thinking tools.
Yeah, it's almost like having one really buff finger.
Yeah,
and you're like, I'm so good at art.
Yeah,
but you're like, you only have one finger, you can't really grab much, right?
No, you can't, because it's like now maybe your research sucks.
Right.
Maybe your approach needs to be changed. Maybe the way you think about things. It's like then it's like it really opened up to the idea of like, making sure that I do a lot of pre sort of development before I get into stuff. A lot of times I would have this. It's like as an artist, when somebody gives you a like an assignment or something, you have the finish in your head,
right? Which
is wrong. It's great. Like we all feel like, oh, I have this incredible art, and it's like I feel like fine artists do this a lot. They have vision in their head and they want to produce that vision.
Yeah.
But when you're in commercial art, it doesn't always work that way. Because it's like you have to have, there's your vision, and then there's the client's vision, and then there's your like creative director's vision. There's all of these people that are involved in this process that all have that same sort of mindset of what this thing has to look like. So when you're approaching something from that perspective, you really have to do a lot of sort of planning.
Yeah.
And that pre-planning is, study the subject matter, which takes time and it's kind of boring, and then go start pulling references and look at other artists' approach to the same problem to see, I feel like art is always this kind of, you pick up where the last guy left off and you go further than that. You don't want to start from zero and get to like a point where somebody's already like way past you, right? So you have to see what's been done in this genre, and that takes time and effort to research and figure out.
Yeah.
And then once you get to that point, then you can like start opening up to like new opportunities and things like that. So it's like that became sort of a thing where I started acknowledging that my personal vision isn't the only right choice.
Gotcha.
So it's like then you would commit to one thing, and if it didn't go your way, or if they didn't like it, or if it wasn't you couldn't execute what you were having in your head, there'd be this huge disappointment inside.
True.
Whereas like you kind of do the preliminary work, you show the sketches early, you kind of like go through this process of getting the consensus and making sure.
Because like you're building the experience of building it together, not just saying, hey, here it is.
You suck and I suck.
No, dude. Oh, that makes so much more sense.
This is a process, It's like, it's their project. It's somebody else is giving you an opportunity to do something for them.
I think that's maybe some of the misconception that a lot of early designers and artists have, is that they think they're trying to hit bullseye from the very beginning, rather than it's like a collective journey about how to get there together.
Exactly. And then a lot of times, honestly, like I've had these, and not to say that the other way doesn't work. I've had many things where it's like I've been on set, we were doing a photo shoot, and like done a bunch of Call of Duty campaigns. One of my favorite pieces just came about right there on the spot. I took the whole crew, we shot the whole thing, I comped it right that night, and that was plastered all over the world. Nice. It was like at like every giant sort of like, it was in London, it was but that piece like was sparked in that moment and it went to the finish line. That happens. That's not, but you're not going to be able to do that in commercial work every single time.
Yeah.
There's you have to have more of a process approach, because you're repeating this like 100 to 1,000 times a year.
Yeah.
And then on and on.
You have to have the consistency. Right?
Yeah, you need to have a consistent process and consistent system that allows for successful art to be built.
So do you think that, your sort of you're talking about how there's always better artists, and you kind of felt like that. That was like
Yeah.
your battle. But having these other tools of knowing process, doing good preparation was a way to get rid of that crutch. It wasn't always about art, but it's about all these other. I like how you said it. It's about all these other tools that you're able to develop.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, you know what? It that definitely helped enough, but then it just became more about it's like once you get to a certain level where you're executing high level pieces, like I don't know who told me this, but it was just like I think it was at Art Center where and you see this happening around 6th or 7th term where work just kind of you get to that mountaintop of like, okay, these pieces can be like now they're at professional level. Right. So, and same thing with the industry, when you get to that point where you can do pieces that are considered like finishes, they can be, published, they can do all of these things, then it becomes, then you realize like, okay, I'm okay. Like now I have my style. And, you start getting some of that insecurity, but there's always like you still have to have that mindset of always looking around you and trying to learn from other artists.
Absolutely.
Because it's like I know some people will just like they'll hit the mark and they'll be like, this is it, like I'm not going beyond this. This is where I'm at and this is how I want to move forward and stuff. But it's like I'm always sort of making sure it's like I don't get like caught in one thing, so
kind of more like be well-rounded, have a lot of different traits.
you start trying different things, because then then the competition becomes you.
Absolutely, right.
You start competing against yourself because it's like, am I like I got this down, what do I do next? Like at my agency we do like all kinds of styles. Like right now we're working on stuff that's like super simple.
Actually, could you talk about your agency, like what company you do right now and stuff like that?
So I have an agency called Concept House. We've been around for almost 6 years now. We work with a lot of major publishers and entertainment studios, and we do everything from like most of it is marketing facing, but it's like we do a lot of like live services work, we do a lot of key art, we do video, we do sometimes even like assets and stuff for games and things like that. So we're kind of all over the place. Branding. So there's a lot of different types of clients that we have. It's like I don't see ourselves as like just an agency. We're like a creative think tank, basically.
Cool.
So it's like when people come to us, they come with, it's like our styles range from like photography to like really simple 2D sort of graphics.
That's awesome.
And all of those things have their own challenges and they're not easy to execute. The 2D stuff, like the super simple sort of what might look easy to a lot of people is just as challenging as doing something like super high res for like Destiny or something like that.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, I guess this goes into a nice segue into like, the next question, which is, like starting a company, right? That's definitely not easy to do, and it has its own challenges and things like that. What were some of the big lessons, I guess, or big things that you take away now that you think about it? 6 years, quite a while now,
honestly, it's a lot of the things that, it's like when you're starting an agency and you're starting a business, you think about the product at first. But that's only, I would say, 50% of the challenge.
Okay, like what your service is.
Executing the work is honestly the easier part.
Okay.
The hard parts are managing payroll. making sure all the bills are paid for the company because we need all of these services and rent and all of this stuff. Building a team, dealing with the day-to-day ups and downs of art creation through other people.
Right.
Because it's like I can't execute everything myself. Sure. I have a team, and if somebody's having a bad day and we're hitting a deadline and like
the fires,
the fires, the everyday challenges. It's like you wake up as a business owner, you wake up to new challenges every day.
Right.
That is really, really, really the tough part, and that's something that is like, and then it's like when you finish a project, you're already like, well, what are we going to do next?
Right? Yeah.
Like that constant need to bring in more work and keep the agency growing and going. And so the challenges are outside of the art execution, which are kind of the big sort of the thing that I never thought about.
Because, if you almost think about it, you had a 20-year head start or a 15-year head start with the art understanding, right? And so now all these other things are almost asking you to, hey, catch up, like, no accounting to the same level, like no business and contracts, and
and that stuff is not like, it doesn't come naturally to an artist.
I agree with you.
So it
I
definitely,
understand what you mean, man.
It's challenging, it's frustrating, it's having the working with the right people to help you sort of mitigate a lot of those things is good, but it takes a lot of learning. And then success can also be its own sort of issue too,
Sure.
So it's like,
can you dive into that a bit more? That's a really
so it's like, let's say you have a lot of work coming in and you're doing a lot of really cool stuff, and that seems like everything's going well, but what ends up happening is you start overestimating things, like not being a good business person, because it's like, well, let's hire more people, let's throw more money at it, let's do this, let's do that, let's get it done, and keep moving forward. That constant need to move forward stops you from creating a like a holistic business concept that is always like checking all of the like, do these budgets support this staff? Do you have enough reserves? Do you do this? Do you do that? All of these things are really important to running a successful business. Like getting all of the, enough for marketing, enough for travel. There's a lot of costs involved. That when like just you don't budget for everything properly. Like
and I'm sure there's so much you learn along the way, right? Like I remember talking to our CPA after one of our first years of running the studio, and I was like, how much payroll tax is going on? I'm like, good Lord, that's a lot, and it's just things that never dawn on you. Now I have so much more respect for some of these companies that I worked for when I was the artist.
Exactly.
They were running a really tight ship,
Yeah, and then you're sometimes questioning that, it's like, dude, we're making money, why aren't we doing this and that? And it's like getting to a place where it's like you need to go through the ups and downs of business to really like appreciate the ups and the downs, and really like be able to manage it all, so you create consistency.
Right.
That's the big sort of learnings and challenge of all of this stuff. And then you're like, am I even like, is this even fun anymore?
Well, here's a question. Did you ever think about, what if you never left EA at Redwood and you just stayed there? Do you ever imagine like what you'd be like now versus the you now, right?
Yeah, I don't know, man. I've thought about that, and my like wishful thinking way, I would probably like, I would see myself being like actually creating my own games there or something, or leading some kind of a, become like, trying to, I would kind of be in the same position, because not in the same position, but it's
like you in the parallel universe, but same you, right?
I would still, I think that drive to constantly like get better and better, eventually you would see like the top guy, and because you're striving to do the best for yourself as an artist, that challenge would have appeared at some point in my journey, and I would have tried to like run the studio or something.
Yeah, that's an interesting thing you bring up, because as someone that ran a studio, when I was looking for people to join the team, it wasn't just about the best portfolio. It had to actually be about how are they as a team member. Like, do they have similar energy? Do they like to sort of achieve, like they like to get results versus just kind of do it bare minimum. Those are huge things, and I think working with people, that's where you learn their personalities. And I think that's why sometimes a CEO or like a higher person will choose somebody younger, because they see that energy that's so important. That will be that driving force to like kind of take them through the life.
I think that the team dynamic is can make or break the project.
Absolutely.
Sure. Absolutely. Like I've been on both sides of that, where it's like there's teams that are clashing and everybody's frustrated and the work suffers. And then there's situations where everybody is kind of in harmony, and that becomes a really great experience for everybody.
Nice.
And that's, for me, that's like one of the most important parts of running an agency now, is just making sure that balance is there,
Right.
And that's hard, because when you hire people, you don't know a lot of times, like that first interview, and they can even do a tryout and do really great, and then once they're on staff,
then you'll see.
and you're like, you sometimes don't see a lot of things, because you're so kind of above when you're looking at the long vision, the day-to-day sort of gets lost.
Yep. That's I think it's almost like, as when you're trying to run a studio, sometimes you're off doing things in the very front, then you have to run them to the back, and like you're constantly doing like a I don't know, like status check on everything, make sure everything's running smooth. You gotta look out far, then you gotta look down, and
it's really hard to keep that going, but it's like I always try to keep an ear out for like problems, and if they're and I'll be honest, there's been times throughout my both career and agency life where I couldn't fix those problems, and just dealt with it. It's like you can't just fire everybody, or you can't like not work with everybody. Just sometimes you just like grind through it and all this stuff, but those experiences, honestly, like in the end, don't do anybody any good.
Sure.
Some people are like, grind through it and you get tougher, and no, like it doesn't need to be, not everything needs to be hard for it to be good, and
I think that's one of the bigger misconceptions about success sometimes, because on the outside, someone can kind of just look at the resume and be like, oh man, Art, you've got this great company and you do this and that, and they could just kind of see you from the outside, but it's always like that saying, the duck is like kicking really hard underwater. You don't see what's happening underwater. It's just very calm up top. No. What do you think are some other misconceptions or the things that people don't see about success? They just go, oh man, it's because, you're a great artist. That's why you're here. But like, what do you say to that?
No, it's definitely like, it's hard. I mean, there's no, I've never like thought it was going to be, I thought it would be easy, to be honest with you. Like at some point it would like let up, but it really isn't. It's kind of, you have to get used to a certain sort of, that saying, right? Hard things are hard.
Yeah.
No, like avoiding the doing, like getting great clients, doing high level work is hard. I don't care how talented you are and how all of these things, sometimes it could be easy for some people, but on the
at least for yourself, it's
it's really difficult. There's a lot of like internal sort of you feel, especially leading, leadership is a very sort of lonely kind of experience.
I heard that saying, entrepreneurship is a lonely place.
Yeah,
I've heard there's a saying like that. Yeah.
And it's going through, because it's like you got to wake up and you got to make sure everybody's good. You got to like present yourself in the best way possible to both clients, your artists, and everybody. But on the inside, getting the work done, getting the solving the problems that you deal with, all of these things, everything kind of is on yourself.
Yeah.
And that stuff is very, it can be very draining. But one of the things that I'm again building tools, right? So now I'm at a different stage in life where the tools that I'm building are to mitigate those struggles. And those things are, spending time, exercise, and spending time with friends, having conversations like this, not always being stuck in your cocoon and facing the problems all the time. Balance, learning how to sort of balance your time and do a lot of these things. Like, these are also important things to sort of, figuring out balance is a tough thing.
Sure.
Especially for an entrepreneur, because it's like, it never stops. Like you wake up in the morning and you're an entrepreneur. When you're sleeping at night, you're an entrepreneur. Whereas like when you work somewhere, you leave the problem at the job at 5 or 6 or whatever, you're going home. Even at like 10 o'clock when you go home, you can go and play video games. But when you're having when you're dealing with things as an entrepreneur, it's always in your head, and you're kind of dealing with that. But
and so I think for anyone watching, this is kind of an interesting deep dive into how art can evolve over your span of career. And there's so many different roads that people can take by staying. I still know some people that stay at the same studio, same studio for ever since out of Art Center, that's the same place. And then other people that have navigated, lived in different countries, done this and that. And so the opportunities are really open, So I think it's like, it's pretty cool to hear, your story and journey. But for other artists that are also kind of like relating to this, success as an art, I've heard this a lot. They go, they're just like, James, you're lucky you were born with a talent. Or you're lucky you're talented. I was like, oh man, but once you go to like a certain kind of art school, it's all about hard work. Like it's not just this God-given gift that you can just kick back and rely on. It's almost like comparing concept art and some of the art drive. It's almost like talking about being an athlete. It's like daily practice. It's all about this conditioning and mileage and learning from better people to improve and stuff.
And you're creating something new every day. Like you can't go do the same thing you did yesterday.
Right. Ooh, good point.
Good point. It's just like it. In my world, almost 75 to 80% of the stuff that I do is a guy with a gun. Most games are a guy with a gun. So when you're doing a lot of key art and marketing and things like that, it's a character with a gun. Where that gun pose is held and how that is shot, what the color palette is, what the lighting is, there's formulas that work really well, but you can't do that every single day.
Right.
You have to reinvent the wheel every single day.
Because your client that hires you doesn't want what you did for the last guy.
Exactly. They want that same level, but they don't want, you can't give them the same piece, right? So it's like you got to go in, and I see this in your work, you're just constantly evolving it. And like every time I see it, like I think I've seen your best pieces, and then new stuff comes, and I'm like, dude, where do you find these ideas?
Thank you.
Like how do you dig into that well and sort of take your greatest piece and then do another great piece that looks nothing like it, And that's I think that's that evolution and process and everything coming together. That's what you want as an artist. You want to get to a point where you're constantly challenging yourself to create cool shit.
And I think that's what I get attracted to by certain people when they have that drive, because it's not easy to always do that, right? And for a majority of people I know, they're not like that. But for some people, I like to hang out with those people because it keeps the drive going. It's very contagious.
Pushing yourself and constantly like driving to make new, like I have a lot of pieces that I love, that I've done, and I'm really happy I can say that now, because before it was like, because of a lot of insecurity and stuff, I always thought my stuff wasn't good enough. But now it's like I have certain things that I just love that I did, but then it's like, what am I going to do next?
It's cool because it's like a self-awareness, you know. It's like, I'm good enough, and it's not about a comparison anymore, right? Because your art floats, right? And if it just becomes about your development, not trying to chase, so to speak.
Continue, evolve.
So I have one more question for you, Art, which is, it's always a hard one, man. Which is, because we always reflect. I think that's part of the human mind. We always go back and reflect, and there's always like, oh, if I did this different, or if I knew this, kind of thing. But if you could go back to your college self, right? That like, let's say you first walked through the halls of Art Center, you're on your first day. I'm sure you can remember that moment, and you're just like, you could walk by and just say, hey, I've got some advice for you. And then be that, just be that guide, that angel that comes by for a split second. What would you give? What would you tell yourself?
I would tell myself to work smarter, not harder.
Really? Cool. Okay. Can you break that down?
Because it's like, I feel like a big portion of my career has been, and I still work really hard.
Yeah, you do.
This is a constant struggle to always go, work smart, not hard. I mean, you're still going to work hard. There's, doing hard things is hard, like we just mentioned.
Hard is hard.
But hard is hard. But like in the early parts of my career, it was just purely hard work.
Yeah.
And when I was talking about developing more of that consciousness of like doing the right type of research, giving yourself time to learn things and figuring out things rather than like forcing your way to it, like learn the formulas, right? Like figure drawing. If you take the time, it's like you just see the character and you want to draw it. But to take the time to figure out, the methods and the shapes and what connects to what, and this is like boring, sort of tedious, kind of uninspiring work, and it's not going to lead to like some great art pieces. But taking that time to really figure that part out, it's going to help you, go further and produce a lot more great work. Whereas like, I'll just draw enough faces to like understand it, rather than like, your eyes are supposed to be this far apart, this and that, like get all the rules down, learning going through that process. So I would say, study more, focus on the process and understand it better, work smarter rather than work harder.
Gotcha. Because I think as you know where you are now, you kind of look back at some of the experiences and say, oh, this is what I should have been really focusing on when I was learning that. Not, draw like Michelangelo, but just understand it so that you could do character design. Like what's that?
Exactly. Like figure out the anatomy, figure out like, layouts, and figure out like all of the different rules. Anything that you're working on, first study like the rules, like figure out why something, if it's a 2D art, what are the rules of this thing? Like why do people do it this way? How do you shade in 2D? How do you do this? How do you, like all of these little things that you need to kind of figure out. Take the time to figure that out before you jump into the process. Because a lot of times you jump into the process and then figure it out, because you have this vision in your head and you're trying to execute this vision and you're taking the long road. Whereas like if you just go in and like, oh, okay, you lay out your darks and then you lay in your lights and then you kind of go in and darken up your shadows and, take that step, right? instead of like, you know, trying to figure it out as you go. I think that there's a huge difference between those two approaches.
I think it's almost like the craft of art versus the craft of image creation for like commercial design. Yeah, you know, it's at least for myself. I remember when I was first working in the industry, I wasn't able to create consistency.
Yeah.
You know, so some pieces would be good, and then I would try to do it the same way, and it would just be like crap.
Yeah.
And I realized it was like a big process thing.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
like trying to fill in those gaps. So it wasn't about, hey, you know, who can draw the eyeball the best, or like who knows color theory the best. It was more like, how do I format my working style to deliver a conversation? Yeah, it was that was a big learning curve.
Every art form, everything that you do, you know, has a kind of an established system. You know, 'cause we're not like, you're not, even though each piece is different, it's been done before, right? It's not like it's a new vision.
Yeah.
But the execution of it isn't new.
Yeah.
You know, we've been doing digital art for a while. You know, it's going to continue to evolve. You know, you're getting a lot of new tools that are coming into the space, you know. So it's figuring out the rules of how to do it right, and then executing on those rules, I think will just take a lot of frustration out of the process.
Well, dude, I think, man, this has been an awesome talk. It's been so cool to hear about your journey some more, and just you. I've heard some stuff I've never heard before. That's cool. But you know, I think one thing to also share, you know, to everyone out there is, you don't just do your company, you also do your own art. You're making video games, right?
Yeah, this is the next frontier for me. You know, it's like, again, it goes back to that day I went into Insomniac. You know, that was my original dream, was to have my own game studio at some point. You know, like, it was something that I didn't know I wanted, but I knew I wanted. And then I fell in love with just the, you know, the art process, and then marketing, and went through all of that stuff. And I feel like I've achieved enough in that arena where it's like the next challenge is you know, potentially developing my own games and things like that. So I think, you know, as I'm kind of getting my agency into a where it needs to be, and I'm happy with the work we're producing and all that stuff, you know, that what's next kind of thing is creeping in, and that's, you know, starting to think about, you know, potentially launching a like an indie studio or something like that. You know, this is kind of something that I'm trying to, because it is, a lot of it is very new. There's a lot of learning involved. You know, it's not, and I feel like from the art creation perspective, there's not a lot for me to continue to learn. It's just very executional at this point. So building games, and I also want to do movies. You know, like, these are like, you know, because it's like we still have, hopefully, like another, you know, my career goes on, right? So I have to find new challenges to, you know, and going back to the initial, you know, like I said, I started trying to go into film, and that love has always just kind of been on the back burner. And I know I want to make games, and that's always been on the back burner. So I'm paying attention to those now a little
bit. On, man.
You know, I'm trying to see, you know, and it's not a immediate goal like tomorrow, but, you know, in the next 5 years, I want to be able to like build another company that does development, and then the next 10 years maybe, or in the next, you know, in the same time or something, you know, try to go into film as well. Because a lot of
planning,
it's the next sort of frontiers, you know. So that's why I'm kind of in that place now. You know? That's
nice.
That's the hobby that'll become the future sort of endeavor.
Gotcha. And your company is called Concept House?
Yeah, Concept House, Haus.
Haus. So check them out. You guys got a website, concepthouse.com?
Oh no, it's concept.house.
Concept.house, Haus.
Yeah.
.com.
So we were, that was, But
Cool. Yeah, check
check it
them
out.
out. And dude, Art, it was awesome talking. I would love to see, when some of those games and stuff like come out to fruition and stuff. Hopefully that'll happen soon. That'd be awesome to see those.
Yeah, it'll take a little bit of time, but
Uh-huh.
we're working on
Right
all kinds
on,
of cool
man.
shit.
And and I just wanted to close by, as a personal hobby, I think something that we really share ever since our petrol days is cars.
Yeah,
Yeah. And it's funny how
cars
you're
are
talking about drawing cars.
that's absolutely, man. That's what I was doing in high school. Like just that was customizing cars, and drawing that dream car, and yeah, cars are definitely a passion.
It's still
so.
big in your life too right now.
It is. It is. I'm living a little more vicariously through my son.
Okay.
His journey into cars. Like I like. It's funny because we used to go on drives, and he was my passenger, and now I'm his passenger.
That's so cool, man.
So it's I enjoy it.
And I remember your son, when we were working at Petrol, he was probably the age of my son now.
Yeah.
Like right around 4 years old or something.
Yeah.
And just like last year, we went on that tracking trip to Laguna Seca, and then I was like, "Wow, what a trip, man!" Yeah, that was awesome.
He was driving with you guys, and then man, that was an awesome experience.
That's cool. Yeah,
it was really great. Yeah.
Such an awesome journey, man. It's really cool, inspiring to hear everything that you've done and stuff like that. So. Yeah, and thank you for taking the time today.
Absolutely,
talk with everybody and talk with me.
I gotta give credit where it's due, and thank you for bringing me on board. And always, you're that person that's always kind of pushed me. Even, starting Concept House, you were kind of in my head a long time ago.
Right on, man.
It was just like you were always like, "Hey, man, you gotta like do your own thing and do this, do that." That always kind of stuck with me.
Right on, dude.
And getting to a point where I had the courage to actually do it. So you played a huge role.
Right on, brother.
So thank you. I appreciate it. And, I really enjoy seeing your success, and always a huge fan of your work, man.
Oh, thank you.
I think you're definitely one of the best in the industry.
I appreciate it, man. It's been an absolute pleasure, dude. Well, thanks guys for checking out another episode. We're just wanted to talk about some art and community and just journey. And there's so many things out there that make this world of concept design, commercial design, just it's a huge industry. And, I think for a lot of students, it seems like there's like I'm going to work in a video game company or work here. But
no.
As you can see, there's so many things that we can do,
Yeah,
so
it's wide open.
Right on. Yeah. Awesome, everybody. We'll see you guys on the next one. Take care. All right, dude.
Awesome, man.
Sick, man.